The call came at 1:47 p.m. I know because I was staring at the clock on the bridal suite wall, counting the minutes until I became someone's wife. When my phone buzzed against the marble vanity and my sister's name lit up the screen, I almost didn't answer. My maid of honor, Rachel, was stitching a last-minute repair into my bodice, her mouth full of pins, and 213 guests were already filling the pews of St. Catherine's in downtown Louisville. The string quartet had been warming up for 20 minutes. My father was downstairs in the lobby rehearsing a speech he'd pretend was off the cuff. 2 hours. I was 2 hours from walking down that aisle and becoming Elena Vasquez Martin. And every deposit, every sleepless night of planning, every compromise between my mother's Catholic traditions and Derek's family's secular preferences, all of it was converging on this single golden afternoon in June. But Megan never called during the day. My younger sister worked night shifts at Norton Children's Hospital in pediatric emergency, and she slept like the dead until 4. If she was calling now, something had pulled her out of sleep, and Megan didn't wake for small things. I told Rachel to hold on. I picked up the phone. "Elena." Megan's voice was stripped down to wire. Not panicked. Worse. Controlled in the way she got when she was intubating a child and needed her hands to not shake. "I need you to listen to me, and I need you to not ask me to explain everything right now. Meg, I'm literally getting sewn into my dress. Mom is sick." The room didn't change. The afternoon light kept pouring through the tall windows. Rachel kept stitching. But something behind my sternum dropped, the way an elevator lurches when the cable slips one notch. "What do you mean, sick?" "She started seizing about 40 minutes ago. I'm at the house. Dad called me because she collapsed in the kitchen, and he didn't know." "Elena, listen. I've been watching the news all morning. There's something happening in Memphis and Nashville. They're not calling it what it is yet. But I've seen things in the ER this week that it's not right. People coming in with bites, with fevers that don't respond to anything, and then they..." She stopped. I heard her breathe. "I need you to come home. Not after the wedding. Now." "Megan, the wedding is in 2 hours. I know when your wedding is." Her voice cracked for the first time. Just a fracture, quickly sealed. "I'm telling you that Mom has the same symptoms I've been seeing all week. And I'm telling you that if what I think is happening is actually happening, Louisville is not going to be a safe place to be tonight. None of the cities will be." Rachel had stopped stitching. She was watching my face. "I want to tell you I made the decision instantly. That blood loyalty kicked in like a reflex, and I dropped everything without hesitation. But that's not true. What I actually felt, standing in that bridal suite in a $4,200 dress with baby's breath pinned in my hair, was a hot wave of anger. At Megan for doing this now. At my mother's body for betraying her on this specific day. At the universe for its timing. I had spent 11 months building this day. Derek and I had survived long distance. Survived his mother's quiet disapproval of my family. Survived a miscarriage in October that we'd told no one about. This wedding was supposed to be the threshold. The proof that good things could hold. "How bad?" I asked. "Come home, Elena." She hung up. And I stood there with pins in my dress and 200 people waiting and a groom I loved adjusting his cufflinks 2 floors below me. And I made the first of many decisions that I cannot undo. I looked at Rachel. "I need you to find Derek. Tell him I need 10 minutes." Derek found me in the hallway outside the bridal suite, and the look on his face when he saw mine told me he already understood that something had shifted. Derek could always read a room before anyone spoke. It's what made him a good attorney and an even better partner. He read me now the way he read hostile witnesses, quickly, completely, with a stillness that meant he was already 3 steps ahead. What happened? I told him. All of it. Megan's call, Mom's collapse, the things Megan had been seeing in the ER. The reports out of Memphis and Nashville that I hadn't been following because I'd been buried in seating charts and floral arrangements for the past 2 weeks. Derek listened without interrupting. Then he pulled out his phone and opened a news app, and I watched his face change as he scrolled. Not dramatically. Derek didn't do dramatic. But the muscle along his jaw tightened, and he scrolled for a long time without speaking. "There's a CDC alert," he said quietly. "Issued 90 minutes ago. They're calling it atypical viral encephalitis. They're recommending that residents of 6 Tennessee counties shelter in place." Tennessee, not Kentucky. Not yet. He looked up from the phone. But I-65 runs straight from Nashville to Louisville. That's 3 hours with no traffic. We stood in that hallway, and the string quartet drifted up through the floor below, playing Pachelbel's Canyon. And for a moment the sheer absurdity of it, standing in a wedding venue, discussing epidemiology, almost made me laugh. Almost. "I have to go to my family," I said. "I know." No hesitation. That was Derek. "I'll come with you. Your parents are here. Your whole family is here. And yours is 30 minutes south in Shepherdsville. And your mother is having seizures. And your sister, who doesn't scare easily, sounds scared." "Derek, if I leave, there is no rescheduling this. Your mother will never forgive me. Half these people flew in from Phoenix." He took both my hands. His were warm and steady. He had broad hands, careful hands, and I had spent 3 years memorizing the weight of them. "Elena, it's a party. Your mom is sick. It's our wedding. We're already married in every way that matters. The paper just hasn't caught up." I kissed him. Hard, fast, with my veil half falling and my lipstick transferring to his mouth in a smear of rose that his mother would have photographed as evidence of my unsuitability. Then I pulled back. And what I said next is the thing I replay more than anything else. More than the blood. More than the highway. More than what happened at the river. "Stay here," I said. "Handle your family. Explain. I'll take Rachel, I'll get to my mom, and I'll call you when I know what's happening. If it's nothing, I'll be back before the cocktail hour is over, and we'll do the ceremony tonight in the garden." "Elena, your mother needs you here to manage this. My mother needs me there. We divide and conquer. It's what we do." He didn't like it. I could see the resistance in his posture, the way he leaned slightly toward me, as if proximity alone could change the physics. But Derek respected decisions. It was one of the things I loved about him, and one of the things that, in this specific moment, I was counting on. 2 hours, he said. "If I don't hear from you in 2 hours, I'm driving down myself." 2 hours. He wiped the lipstick off his mouth with his thumb. He straightened my veil, a gesture so gentle and automatic that it almost undid me. Then he stepped back, and I turned and I walked down that hallway in my wedding dress, with the train gathered in my fist. And I did not look back, because I knew if I looked back, I would stop. Rachel was waiting by the elevator. She'd changed out of her bridesmaid dress and into jeans, and she had my overnight bag in one hand and her car keys in the other. "I heard through the door," she said. "Let's go." We drove south on I-65 in Rachel's Civic, and I unzipped the back of the dress while she drove because I couldn't breathe in it anymore. I pulled on the change of clothes from my bag jeans, a t-shirt, running shoes. Practical things. I left the dress draped across the back seat like a shed skin. The highway was normal. Saturday afternoon traffic, families heading to the lake, trucks hauling freight. Nothing to indicate that the world was doing anything other than continuing. But Megan texted once at 2:15. "Hurry." That single word sat in my chest like a stone. My parents' house sat on 2 acres at the end of Vine Hill Road in Shepherdsville, a raised ranch with a detached garage and a garden my mother had been tending for 30 years. Tomatoes, peppers, squash, herbs. She talked to the plants. My father teased her about it, and she told him the tomatoes listened better than he did. When we pulled in at 2:38 p.m., the front door was open. Not ajar. Open wide, the screen door propped back with a cast-iron dog doorstop my mother had bought at a flea market in Bardstown. The house exhaled its cool air into the afternoon heat, and I could see down the hallway to the kitchen, where something dark was smeared on the linoleum. Rachel saw it too. She stopped the car, but didn't kill the engine. "Elena, stay here." "I'm not staying in the car." "Rachel, stay in the car. If something is wrong, I need you to be able to leave." She wanted to argue. I could see it. But Rachel was a pragmatist beneath her warmth, and she recognized the logic. She put the car in park and kept her hands on the wheel. I walked up the front steps in my running shoes, and the screen door creaked the way it had creaked for 20 years, and the dark smear on the kitchen floor was blood. Not a lot. A handprint, a drag mark. Someone had fallen and been helped up, or fallen and crawled. "Megan? Back bedroom." My sister's voice came from the end of the hall, from my parents' bedroom, and it was steady the way a surgeon's hands are steady by force of will and practice, not by peace. I found them in the bedroom. My father, David, was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding my mother's hand. My mother, Carmen, was lying on top of the covers, still dressed in the outfit she'd planned to wear to the wedding, a navy dress with small white flowers. Her shoes were off. Her eyes were closed. Her skin had a color I'd never seen on a living person, a grayish yellow, like old newspaper. Megan stood by the window. She'd pulled the curtains half shut and set up a makeshift monitoring station on the nightstand thermometer. Blood pressure cuff, a pulse oximeter clipped to my mother's finger. Her medical bag was open on the dresser. She looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw something I'd never seen in my little sister before. Not when she'd broken her arm at 12. Not when she'd worked her first pediatric code at 24. She was afraid. "Her temperature's 104.2, Megan said. "It was 102 when I got here an hour ago. She's responsive to pain, not to voice. Pulse is elevated. BP's dropping." She paused. "There are petechiae along her left arm, small hemorrhages under the skin." "What does that mean in human words, Megan?" "It means her blood isn't clotting properly. It means whatever this is, it's systemic. It's not the flu. It's not a stroke." My father hadn't looked up. He was stroking my mother's hand with his thumb, a slow back and forth across her knuckles. And his face was perfectly calm, and his eyes were red. "She was fine this morning," he said. "She was pressing your grandmother's rosary for the ceremony. She wanted you to carry it." I knelt beside the bed. My mother's breathing was shallow but regular. Up close, the grayish tint to her skin was worse. Her lips were dry and faintly blue. "Megan, can we take her to a hospital?" Megan pulled me into the hallway. She closed the bedroom door halfway and dropped her voice. "I called Norton's. I called Baptist Health. I called U of L. Norton's told me they've suspended non-emergency intake. Baptist Health's line has been busy for 40 minutes. U of L's ER is on diversion. On a Saturday? Yeah, on a Saturday. She pulled out her phone and showed me a text thread from a colleague named James, a fellow ER nurse. The messages were short, clipped, professional. The last one, sent 20 minutes ago, read, "They're locking the ward. Don't come in. It's not safe." Megan, what is this? She looked at our father through the half-open door. Then she looked at me. 2 nights ago, a man came into my ER 46 construction worker. No prior history. He'd been bitten on the forearm by a co-worker on a job site in Clarksville. By the time he got to us, the wound was necrotic black tissue, spreading fast. We started IV antibiotics, called infectious disease. 20 minutes later, he coded. We worked him for 12 minutes. He came back, but he didn't come back right. She stopped. I've coded a lot of people, Elena. When they come back, they're confused, groggy, disoriented. This man sat up and grabbed a nurse by the throat. It took 3 of us to pull him off. Security sedated him. By morning, he was in a medically induced coma, and they'd transferred him to a facility in Lexington. She swallowed. I've seen 4 more like him since then. All bites, all the same progression. The hallway was quiet. Afternoon light slanted through the window at the end of the hall and caught the dust motes drifting in the still air. Mom wasn't bitten, I said. No, she wasn't. But the CDC alert mentions airborne transmission as a secondary vector, respiratory droplets. Megan's jaw tightened. She volunteers at the Bullitt County Senior Center twice a week, Elena. 30 elderly people in a poorly ventilated room. I leaned against the wall. The plaster was cool through my t-shirt. How long? I don't know. The bitten ones turned in hours. If this is airborne exposure, it could be slower. Could be days. She met my eyes. Could be tonight. By 4 p.m., the television was telling us what Megan already knew. Rachel had come inside by then. I couldn't leave her sitting in a running car while the neighborhood began to change around us. She sat on the living room couch, my discarded wedding dress folded neatly in her lap. She'd brought it in from the back seat without being asked. A gesture of care, so Rachel-like it ached. While my father flipped between channels with a hand that had begun to tremble. CNN was running a banner. CDC declares public health emergency, unknown pathogen shelter in place, orders expanding. A woman in a Navy suit was explaining transmission vectors with a calmness that didn't match the footage behind her shaky cell phone video from a Memphis hospital parking lot where people were running and something was happening near the ambulance bay that the camera couldn't quite resolve, but that my body understood before my mind did. The shape of violence, the geometry of pursuit and collapse. NBC had cut to a split screen. Nashville on the left, Atlanta on the right. In Nashville, the National Guard was setting up a checkpoint on the I-24 overpass. In Atlanta, a highway was gridlocked for miles. A river of brake lights stretching south toward the horizon. My father turned off the television. He sat there for a moment, remote in hand, staring at the black screen. Then he said, very quietly, "I'm going to board the windows." He went to the garage. I heard him pulling lumber, the clatter of the sawhorses being set up. My father, David Reyes, 62 years old, retired electrician, a man who had wired half the new construction in Bullitt County over a 30-year career, was doing what he always did when the world stopped making sense. He was building something. I called Derek. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I texted, "At my parents'. Mom is bad. What's happening at the venue? Call me." The message delivered. The 2 blue check marks appeared. He read it, but no response came. Rachel was watching me. He's probably dealing with 200 confused guests and his mother having a meltdown. Probably. He'll call. Yeah. But something was tightening in my chest that wasn't about whether Derek would call. It was about the highway, I-65 between Louisville and Shepherdsville, the same road Rachel and I had driven 90 minutes ago without incident. If Nashville's guard was already setting up checkpoints, if Atlanta's highways were clogged, then the window for easy travel was not going to stay open. I went outside. The late afternoon was humid, the air thick with the green smell of cut grass and the distant hum of cicadas. Vine Hill Road was quiet. The Kaufman house across the way had its curtains drawn. The Petersons' truck was gone from their driveway. 2 houses down, old Mrs. Delaney was standing on her porch, looking south toward the interstate overpass, visible from the ridge, where I could now see something I hadn't noticed before. A smudge of black smoke rising against the pale sky. Mrs. Delaney saw me looking. "There's been sirens for the last hour," she called across the distance. "Coming and going. My grandson called from Elizabethtown. He says the Walmart down there is already out of water." I went back inside and found Megan in the bedroom, changing my mother's IV bag. She'd started a saline drip using supplies from her medical bag, and she was checking the pulse oximeter with the rapid efficiency of someone who had done this 10,000 times under fluorescent lights. "Her O2 is dropping," Megan said without looking up. 91%. If it hits 88, we have a serious problem." What happens below 88? Organ damage, brain damage. And in the patients I saw at Norton's. She didn't finish. "Say it." "Below 88, the fever spikes, the brain swells, and they stop being who they were." My mother's hand twitched on the bedsheet. Her fingers curled and uncurled, a restless motion, like someone searching for something in the dark. I sat beside her. I took her hand the way my father had, and I held it, and her skin was hot and papery, and I said, "Mom, I'm here. I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner." Her lips moved. No sound. But I read the shape of the word, Mia. My father finished boarding the ground floor windows by 6 p.m., working with the quiet intensity of a man who understood load-bearing structures and points of failure. He used the lumber he'd stockpiled for a deck project he'd been planning all spring. And he worked with screws instead of nails because screws held better under lateral pressure. He didn't explain this. He just did it. My father had never been a man who narrated his competence. Rachel helped him. She'd never held a drill in her life, but she held boards steady and handed screws and didn't ask questions he couldn't answer. That was Rachel. Useful in a crisis not because she had skills, but because she had the rare ability to see what someone else needed and become that without ego. I made an inventory of the house. Food, enough for maybe a week if we were careful. My mother kept a deep pantry: canned beans, canned tomatoes, rice, dried pasta, flour. A freezer in the garage held chicken and ground beef and bags of frozen vegetables. Water. The house was on county water, not a well, which meant it depended on a treatment plant and pumping stations that depended on electricity and staffing. I filled every container I could find: pots, pitchers, the bathtub, a plastic storage bin lined with a garbage bag. If the water stopped, we'd have maybe 3 days. Megan stayed with Mom. At 6:30, she came into the kitchen where I was lining up canned goods on the counter and said, "Her temperature's 105.1. The Tylenol isn't touching it. I've given her everything I safely can." What does 105 mean? In a normal patient, potential brain damage, seizure risk. in the patients I saw at Norton's. She leaned against the counter. She was 28 years old, and in this light, with the shadows under her eyes and the flat set of her mouth, she looked 40. Elena, we need to talk about what happens if she turns. Don't. I'm not being cruel. I'm being clinical because one of us has to be. If Mom progresses the way the others did, there will be a window, maybe minutes, maybe an hour, between when she stops responding and when she becomes dangerous. In that window, we need to move her somewhere secure. The garage, somewhere with a door we can lock. You want me to lock our mother in a garage? I want us to survive the night. We stared at each other across the kitchen where we'd grown up, where our mother had taught us to make tamales at Christmas, and where our father had helped us with math homework at the table that still had a burn mark from the time Megan knocked over a candle at age 9. The ordinariness of the room, the rooster clock, the spice rack, the faded prayer card of the Virgin of Guadalupe tucked behind the knife block pressed against the words my sister was saying, and could not make them fit. Okay, I said, if it comes to that. But not yet. Not yet. At 7:15, I tried Derek again. The call didn't connect. Not voicemail this time. Just dead air and a recorded message. All circuits are busy. Please try your call again later. I tried texting. The message sat with a single gray check mark. Unsent. Rachel found me standing on the back porch, staring at my phone. The sky was dimming into purples and deep blues, and the smoke to the south had multiplied not one column now, but 3, spaced along the horizon like signal fires. Cell towers are probably overloaded, she said. Everyone in the state is trying to call someone. Or the towers are down. She didn't answer that. Rachel, you should go. You have your car. Your family's in Frankfurt. That's an hour north, and the roads might still be clear going that direction. My family is in Frankfurt, she said, and I've been calling them for the last hour. Same thing you're getting. Nothing. She sat down on the porch step beside me. I'm not driving an hour into the unknown by myself, Elena. I'm staying, unless you want me to leave. I don't want you to leave. Then stop trying to be noble and let me help. The first gunshot came at 8:02 p.m. A single crack from somewhere south, maybe a quarter-mile away, sharp and flat in the evening air. We both flinched. Then silence. Then, a few seconds later, 3 more in quick succession. My father appeared in the doorway behind us. He had a shotgun, a Remington 8.7. Oh, he kept in the hall closet, the one he took dove hunting every September. I'd never seen him hold it inside the house. Inside, he said. Both of you. He didn't raise his voice. He never did. But the way he said it, the way his eyes moved past us to the darkening tree line at the edge of the property, told me that my father, who was not an alarmist, who had survived a factory collapse in 1994 and a tornado in 2012 with the same flat pragmatism, was genuinely afraid. We went inside. He locked the back door and dragged the kitchen table against it. The gunshots continued intermittently for the next hour, sometimes close, sometimes distant. At one point, a car raced down Vine Hill Road at a speed that shook the windows, and someone, a man, I think it was screaming from inside it. And the scream had a quality that didn't sound like fear. It sounded like something that used to be fear and had become something else entirely. At 9 p.m., the power went out. Megan had flashlights, 2 in her medical bag, a headlamp, and a pack of chemical light sticks she kept in her car for roadside emergencies. We distributed them carefully, 1 flashlight in the bedroom with Mom, 1 in the living room, the headlamp for whoever was checking the windows. My father found candles in the kitchen drawers, the emergency kind with long burn times. And he set them on saucers around the house with the careful spacing of a man who understood that fire in a boarded-up house was its own kind of threat. My mother's breathing had changed. Even from the living room, I could hear it, a wet, labored sound. Each inhalation accompanied by a faint rattle that made Megan press her lips together every time she checked the stethoscope. Her O2 had dropped to 89, then 88. Megan, I know. She sat with our mother for a long time after that, just the two of them in the candlelit bedroom. And I stood in the doorway and watched my sister hold our mother's hand and murmur to her in the Spanish our mother had spoken to us as children, the language of comfort and lullabies and scolding, the language our mother used when English felt too far from the heart. At 10:30, something hit the front door. Not a knock, a thud. Heavy, arrhythmic, like someone falling against it. Then another. Then a scraping sound, slow and directionless, as if whatever was out there didn't understand the concept of a door, but knew something was behind it. My father stood in the hallway with a shotgun. Rachel stood behind him with a kitchen knife, and I remember thinking how absurd it was Rachel, who made pour-over coffee and ran a freelance graphic design business and cried at dog food commercials, standing in a dark hallway holding a chef's knife with her feet apart like she'd seen in a movie. The scraping stopped. Footsteps, shuffling, uneven, moved along the front of the house, past the boarded windows. We tracked the sound. It reached the corner and continued around to the side yard. Then it faded. My father exhaled. He lowered the shotgun. He didn't say it's gone because he understood that it hadn't gone. It had only moved. That was Mrs. Delaney, Rachel whispered. Don't, I said. I saw her on the porch this afternoon. Elena, she was fine. She was standing right there. I said don't. Because I had seen it too, in the half-second when the shuffling passed the boarded window with the gap at the top. A shape in the moonlight, hunched and listing to one side, moving with the broken mechanical persistence of something whose body continued after its mind had stopped. And the shape had been wearing a housecoat, a pale floral housecoat, and Mrs. Delaney wore pale floral housecoats every day of her life. Rachel turned away. She put the knife on the hall table and pressed both hands over her mouth, and her shoulders shook silently. I held her. There was nothing to say. At midnight, my mother opened her eyes. I was sitting beside her, half dozing in the chair my father had pulled from the dining room. And I felt her hand tighten on mine, a sudden, convulsive grip, and her eyes were open. And she was looking at me, and for one crystalline moment, she was there. My mother, Carmen Reyes, present and aware and seeing me. Elena, her voice was a threat. You didn't get married. Not yet, Mom. I had the rosary, for you, Abuela's rosary. She tried to lift her other hand. It trembled. In my jewelry box, the blue one. I'll get it. You wear it. When you marry him, you wear it. Her eyes were bright, feverish, but focused. He's a good man. He looks at you the way your father looked at me. Mom? Don't cry, Mija. This is not the time for crying. This is the time for being strong. Her grip tightened again. Take care of Megan. She thinks she doesn't need taking care of, but she does. She's so tired. I know. And your father. He won't show it. But he'll break without me. You hold him together. Promise me. Mom, you're going to be fine. Her eyes moved to the window, to the cracks between the boards where moonlight seeped through. And something shifted in her face. A clarity that wasn't confusion and wasn't peace. Something older, something that saw the shape of what was coming. No, mija, I'm not. She looked back at me. I can feel it. It's like a tide. It comes in and pulls back, and each time it comes in a little further. Soon it won't pull back. I couldn't speak. The tears were running, and I'd let them because she'd said this wasn't the time for crying, but she was wrong. She had to be wrong about this one thing at least. I love you, she said. Tell your sister, tell your father. And when it happens when I'm not me anymore, you do what has to be done. Don't let your father see. Take him out of the room first. Promise me. I promise. She closed her eyes. Her grip loosened. Her breathing resumed its wet rattle. Megan was in the doorway. She'd heard. I knew because she was standing perfectly still with her headlamp off, and her hands at her sides, and her face was dry and empty in the way that faces get when the grief is so total it can't find a surface to break through. Her O2 is 85, Megan said. It won't be long now. At 2:17 a.m., my mother stopped breathing. I was holding her hand. Megan was on the other side, checking the pulse oximeter. My father was at the foot of the bed. The candlelight made everything amber and soft. And for a moment, just a moment, it could have been a deathbed scene from any era, any century. A family gathered around a woman they loved, watching her leave. Megan pressed 2 fingers to our mother's neck. She held them there for 30 seconds. She looked at me and shook her head. My father made a sound. It wasn't a sob. It was deeper than that. A sound from a part of the body that doesn't have a name. And he bent forward and pressed his face to my mother's feet, and his shoulders heaved once, twice, and then were still. Dad, Megan said. Dad, I need you to come with me. I'm not leaving her. Dad. Megan's voice had a new quality now, not clinical, not gentle, but something between command and plea. Elena and I need to take care of Mom, and I need you to not be in the room, please. My father looked up. His eyes were red and wet, and he looked at Megan and then at me, and I saw the moment he understood. Not what was happening. He'd been watching the same news we had, but that it was happening to her. To Carmen. To the woman he'd married at 23 in a church in Lexington with 60 people and a 3-piece band and a dress she'd sewn herself. 5 minutes, he said. Give me 5 minutes. We gave him 5 minutes. He sat beside her and held her hand and spoke to her in a voice too low for us to hear. And whatever he said belonged to them and to the 40 years they had built together, and he and I will not try to reconstruct it. Then he stood. He kissed her forehead. He walked out of the room and Rachel was there. And she took his arm and led him to the living room. And I heard the couch creak as he sat down. Megan closed the bedroom door. Help me move her to the floor, she said. I need the space between the bed and the wall. When she reanimates, the bed will slow her down. Give us a few seconds. We moved our mother's body to the floor. She weighed nothing. The fever had burned through her so completely that lifting her felt like lifting a husk. And the wrongness of my mother being light. My mother, who was solid and warm and smelled like cumin and Dove soap, was the thing that nearly broke me. Megan positioned herself by the door with a hammer from my father's toolbox. I stood behind her. How long? I whispered. The bitten ones at the hospital minutes. Airborne cases, I don't know. No data. We waited. The candle on the nightstand guttered in a draft from somewhere. The house creaked. Outside, something moved through the yard, the shuffle drag that had become the soundtrack of the night, and passed without stopping. 11 minutes. My mother's hand twitched first. The same restless curling I'd seen earlier, but faster now. Then her head turned to one side. Then her legs drew up, knees bending, feet pressing against the floor as if she were trying to stand. "Mom?" My voice broke the word in half. "That's not Mom," Megan said. "Elena, that is not Mom." My mother's eyes opened. They were hers, brown, deep-set, framed by the laugh lines 40 years of joy had carved, but they were not hers. They were flat. Not vacant, not empty, but depthless, like looking into a window where the room behind it had been removed. She looked at me with no recognition, no confusion, no anger. Just a directional awareness, a targeting, a turning toward that had nothing human behind it. She sat up in one rigid motion. Her mouth opened. The sound she made was not a moan, not a growl, but something between a gasp and a hiss. A sound I had never heard a human throat produce. She lunged. Megan stepped forward and swung the hammer into the side of her head. Our mother dropped. She didn't fall like a person falls, no crumpling, no sequence. She went down like a structure losing its central column, straight down, and she didn't move again. Megan stood over her with the hammer at her side and her chest heaving and our mother's blood on her scrub top. And she looked at me, and I looked at her, and neither of us spoke, because there was nothing in any language either of us knew that could hold what had just happened in that room. I went to the bathroom and vomited. Then I washed my face. Then I went back to the bedroom and helped my sister wrap our mother in the bedsheet and carry her to the garage, where we laid her on the concrete floor beside the table saw and the lumber and the plans my father had drawn for the deck he would never build. We didn't tell our father what happened. We told him she was gone and that we'd taken care of it and that she hadn't suffered. 2 of those things were true. Dawn came gray and smoky. The fires to the south had spread overnight, and the sky had a haze that softened the sunlight into something sickly, a perpetual overcast that made 7 a.m. look like 5. I hadn't slept. None of us had, though Rachel had dozed on the couch for an hour around 4, her head on a throw pillow, the chef's knife on the floor beside her hand. My father sat in his recliner all night, shotgun across his knees, staring at nothing. In the daylight, I did what I should have done the night before. I looked at our situation clearly. Food, 7 to 10 days if we stretched it. Water, the taps were dry by 3 a.m., so we had only what I'd stored, maybe 70 gallons across all the containers. 4 people, 70 gallons. At a gallon per person per day for drinking and basic hygiene, 17 days. But that assumed no cooking, no medical use, no emergencies. Weapons. My father's shotgun with 14 shells, a hunting rifle in the closet, a .30-06 with a scope and maybe 20 rounds. Kitchen knives, tools from the garage. Rachel had found a baseball bat in the hall closet, aluminum, and she kept it near her at all times now, with a naturalism that would have been funny in any other context. People, 4. Me, 31, in reasonable shape, no survival training, no weapons experience. Megan, 28, exhausted, traumatized, invaluable medical knowledge. Rachel, 30, resourceful, adaptable, 0 combat utility, high organizational intelligence. My father, 62, physically strong for his age, emotionally shattered, experienced with firearms. Communications, dead. Cell towers, landlines, internet all gone. The battery-powered radio my father kept in the garage pulled in only one station, a FEMA emergency broadcast on a loop. Shelter in place. Avoid contact with infected individuals. Do not attempt to travel on interstate highways. Assistance is being coordinated. Stand by for further instructions. It had been saying the same thing for 10 hours. That message is automated, Megan said, turning the dial. There's no one behind it. They recorded it and left. You don't know that. Elena, I know what institutional collapse sounds like. When Norton started losing staff, the automated phone system kept telling callers their expected wait time was 15 minutes. It said that for 6 hours after the last operator left the building. I looked out through the gap in the living room boards. Vine Hill Road was empty. The Kaufman's front door was open now too, the way ours had been yesterday when I arrived. I couldn't see inside. The Petersons' truck was still gone. Mrs. Delaney's house was silent, her porch empty, her floral housecoat now somewhere in the neighborhood, still walking. We can't stay here, I said. Megan looked at me. Rachel looked at me. My father didn't look up. The water will last 2 weeks at most. The food maybe 10 days. We have 14 shotgun shells and 20 rifle rounds. And we have no information, no idea how far this has spread, whether help is coming, whether there's anywhere safer than here. I steadied my voice. We need to make a decision. Do we stay and hope, or do we move and look? Move where? My father said. His voice was flat. He hadn't spoken since we'd told him about Mom. These were his first words in 5 hours, and they had the quality of stones dropped into a well. I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. The decision to leave the house even briefly was the first real fracture between Megan and me. You're not going out there, she said. We don't know how many there are. We don't know how fast they are in daylight. We don't know anything. Which is exactly why I'm going. We need information. We need supplies. And I need to find a working phone or radio that can tell us what's happening beyond this road. I just lost Mom. I'm not losing you in a parking lot. You're not losing me. I'll take the car. I'll drive to the CVS on Preston Highway. It's 4 minutes. I'll grab medical supplies, batteries, anything useful. If it looks bad, I won't stop. I'll drive past and come back. Take me instead. You haven't slept in 36 hours, Meg. Your hands are shaking. If something goes wrong in this house, if Dad needs medical attention, if someone gets hurt, you're the only one who can help. You're more valuable here. She hated that word, valuable. I saw it land like a slap, the reduction of my sister to a function, a utility. But she didn't argue, because she recognized the truth inside the cruelty of the framing. Rachel drove. I sat in the passenger seat with the hunting rifle across my knees, the weight of it alien and cold. The mechanics of it explained to me in a 60-second tutorial from my father that covered loading, aiming, safety, and the single instruction. Don't shoot unless you're sure, and if you shoot, put it in the head. The first thing I noticed was the absence. No traffic, no people, no dogs barking, no lawn mowers, no kids on bikes. Shepherdsville on a Sunday morning should have smelled like coffee and fresh-cut grass and the exhaust of trucks heading to church. Instead, it smelled like smoke, and something under the smoke, something organic and wrong, sweet and bacterial. Preston Highway was worse. Cars abandoned at odd angles, some with doors open, some with windows broken. A minivan had jumped the curb and buried its nose in the front of a dry cleaner. The CVS parking lot held 6 cars, none of them running. The store's front doors were shattered. Rachel stopped the car 50 feet from the entrance. We watched. Nothing moved inside. The lights were off. 2 minutes, I said. Engine running. If you see anything, honk. I'll come out through the back if I have to. Elena? 2 minutes. I went in through the shattered doors with the rifle up, the way I'd seen people do in movies. And the absurdity of learning survival from fiction was not lost on me, but it was all I had. The store was trashed. Shelves toppled, merchandise scattered, ceiling tiles hanging. The pharmacy counter in the back was behind a security gate that someone had partially pried open. I squeezed through the gap. Behind the counter, the shelves were mostly empty. Someone had already swept the painkillers, the stimulants, anything with recreational value. But the antibiotics were still there. The bandages, the antiseptic, the suture kits. I filled a pharmacy bag with everything Megan might need. Amoxicillin, ciprofloxacin, wound care supplies, a blood pressure cuff still in its box, ibuprofen, acetaminophen. I grabbed batteries from the front aisle, 2 flashlights, a case of bottled water that had been overlooked behind a fallen display. I was heading for the door when I heard the sound. Not from outside. From the back of the store, behind the stockroom door. A rhythmic thumping. Slow, persistent. Something pressing against the door from the other side, over and over, with no variation in force or tempo, like a metronome made of meat. I walked faster. The thumping continued. I reached the front doors and stepped into the daylight, and Rachel was already rolling forward, her face tight because she'd heard it too, the sound carrying through the broken storefront. I threw the supplies in the back seat and got in, and we left. On the way back, we passed a man. He was standing in the middle of Preston Highway, just standing, facing south, motionless. He was wearing a church suit, dark pants, white shirt, tie loosened. His arms hung at his sides. He wasn't swaying. He wasn't moving at all. Just standing in the road, in the morning haze, facing the direction of the fires, like he was listening to something only he could hear. We drove around him. He didn't turn. He didn't react. But as we passed, I looked in the side mirror and saw his head slowly rotate to follow the car, tracking us with that depthless, mechanical awareness I'd seen in my mother's eyes, and my hands started shaking, and didn't stop until we were back on Vine Hill Road. We were back at the house for 20 minutes when a voice called from the road. "Hello? Anybody in there? I can see the boards. I know someone's home." My father was at the window immediately, shotgun up, eye to the gap. I came up beside him. A man stood at the end of our driveway. Late 30s, heavy-set, wearing work boots and a Bass Pro Shops t-shirt stained with sweat. He had a backpack over one shoulder and a child with him, a girl, maybe 5, clinging to his leg. She had dark hair and a ponytail, and she was holding a stuffed rabbit, and she was not crying, which was somehow worse than if she had been. Children who have stopped crying have passed through a door that shouldn't be open to them. "My name's Kevin," the man called. "This is my daughter, Sophie. We've been walking since last night. Our car died on 61, about 2 miles back. We just need water, that's all. Water and maybe a place to rest for an hour. We'll move on after." My father looked at me. The question wasn't spoken, but I heard it. Rachel was behind us. "We have to let them in." "We have 70 gallons of water," I said. "For 4 people. They have a child, Elena." "I know they have a child. I can see the child." "So you're going to look at a 5-year-old holding a stuffed animal and tell her father no?" Megan appeared from the hallway. She'd been listening. "Check them for bites first." I went to the front door. I moved the dresser my father had braced against it, and I opened it. And I stood on the porch with the rifle which I'd not put down since the CVS run, which I was beginning to understand I might not put down for a long time. And I looked at Kevin and Sophie. "Are either of you injured? Bitten? Scratched? Any contact with an infected person?" "No, ma'am. We've been staying off the main roads. We haven't seen well. We saw some things, but from a distance. We ran." I need you both to show me your arms and neck. Roll up your sleeves." He did it without complaint. He rolled up Sophie's sleeves too, gently, talking to her the whole time in a low murmur. Their skin was clean. No marks, no discoloration. "Come in." Kevin and Sophie entered my parents' house, and with them came the first expansion of our group, the first extension of our resources to cover people I hadn't chosen, people who arrived by accident of geography and desperation. Kevin drank 2 glasses of water and ate a can of peaches standing at the kitchen counter, his hands shaking. Sophie sat on the living room floor and held her rabbit and stared at the boarded windows with eyes that had seen things no kindergartner should carry. Kevin was a mechanic from Radcliffe, near Fort Knox. He'd been driving north to his ex-wife's house to pick up Sophie for his weekend when the outbreak hit. His ex-wife hadn't answered the door. The door was unlocked. He found Sophie hiding under her bed. He didn't describe what else he found in the house, but the way his eyes moved to his daughter and then away told me everything. "Fort Knox," Megan said, leaning forward. "Is the base operational?" Gates were closed when I drove past. Soldiers on the perimeter. They weren't letting civilians in. I saw a line of cars had to be 100 deep, and they were turning everyone away. Someone in line told me the base was on full lockdown. No one in, no one out. But the base is intact, functional. Looked like it. Power was on. I could see vehicles moving inside the perimeter. Megan looked at me, and I saw a calculation happening behind her exhaustion. Fort Knox was 30 miles south. A functioning military installation with walls, power, resources, and soldiers. It was also locked down, unreachable. And between here and there lay 30 miles of roads we knew nothing about. "It's something," Megan said. "It's a locked door," I said. "Every locked door has a condition for opening. We just don't know what it is yet." My father had returned to his recliner. He hadn't spoken to Kevin. He hadn't looked at Sophie. He was receding, and I could see it happening in real time. The withdrawal into a grief so deep it was becoming its own fortification. A place where the world's new horrors couldn't reach him because he had already absorbed the only one that mattered. I knelt beside him. "Dad, I need you here. I'm here. I need you present, not just in the chair. I need you with us." He looked at me, and for a moment I saw something flicker the old David Reyes. The man who once drove 4 hours through an ice storm to pick me up from college when I called crying about a breakup. The man who built things, because building was how he said "I love you." Then the flicker died. "I'll be here when you need me," he said. "I'm just resting." He wasn't resting. He was leaving. Slowly, by degrees, retreating into the interior architecture of a life that no longer had its central beam. I understood it. I even forgave it. But I couldn't afford it. It was Rachel who found it. At 3 p.m. on our second day, with Kevin cleaning the rifle at the kitchen table and Sophie asleep on the couch and Megan napping in the bedroom and my father in his recliner and the world outside pressing its dead hands against our walls, Rachel sat on the garage floor next to my mother's wrapped body and turned the dial on the battery-powered radio. She turned it slowly, patiently, the way she did everything with a focused, almost meditative attention that I had always admired and sometimes envied. She moved through static and silence, past the looping FEMA message, through dead frequency after dead frequency, and at 3:22 p.m. she called my name. The voice on the radio was male, calm, tired, and real. Not a recording, a live broadcast. Repeating, "This is the Emergency Coordination Center at Fort Campbell, Kentucky-Tennessee border. We are operational. We are receiving civilian refugees at designated checkpoints along U.S. Route 41A. North approach only. All persons seeking entry must submit to medical screening. No weapons beyond the outer perimeter. Families with children and medical personnel will be prioritized. This is not a drill, and this is not a recording. We are broadcasting on the hour, every hour. If you can hear this, we are here. Fort Campbell is holding. I say again, Fort Campbell is holding. The message repeated. Rachel looked up at me from the floor, and her face was lit with something I hadn't seen since we'd left Louisville. Not hope exactly, but the shape hope leaves on a person's features when it arrives unexpected. Fort Campbell, not Fort Knox, which was closer but sealed. Fort Campbell, 100 miles southwest, on the Tennessee border. 100 miles of roads we didn't know, through territory we couldn't predict. With 6 people and a child, and 1 car, and 34 rounds of ammunition. But they were receiving refugees. They were holding. 100 miles, Megan said when I told her. She'd come out of the bedroom with the deep-lined face of someone who'd slept 40 minutes and dreamed badly. Elena, 100 miles might as well be 1,000. Or it might be exactly 100 miles. Roads, fuel, daylight. It's math. Everything's math to you now. Someone has to do the math, Meg. Kevin was in the doorway, listening. My truck died on 61, he said. But the engine wasn't the problem. It was the battery. There are cars all over these roads. If we can find one with fuel and a working battery, I can get it running. I'm a mechanic. That's what I do. Sophie appeared at his knee, holding the rabbit. She looked at me with dark, serious eyes. Are we going somewhere? She asked. I looked at this child who was not mine, whose name I had not known 24 hours ago, who had been found under a bed in a house I didn't want to think about. And something in me, something that had been running on calculus and triage since Megan's phone call in the bridal suite, cracked slightly and let in a different kind of resolve. Yes, I said. We're going somewhere safe. We left at dawn on the 3rd day. My father almost didn't come. I found him in the garage at 4 a.m., sitting on the floor beside my mother's body, his hand on the sheet where her hand was, and he was talking to her. Not crying, not breaking down, talking. Telling her about the plan, about Fort Campbell, about the route I'd mapped using a paper atlas from his glove box south on 61 to Elizabethtown, west on the Western Kentucky Parkway, south on the Pennyrile to Fort Campbell. 108 miles. 5 hours in normal traffic. In this world, unknowable. Dad, we have to go. I know. He didn't move. I'm telling her the plan. She'd want to know the plan. Carmen always wanted to know the plan. She knows. She knew. He was quiet for a long time. Then he stood up. He was stiff, his knees popping, and he steadied himself on the workbench. He picked up the shotgun. He looked down at the shape on the floor. I built this house, he said. Not this house literally, but this life, board by board, 40 years. And now I'm leaving it behind with her in the garage. We're not leaving her. We're surviving her. That's what she asked us to do. He looked at me. And there was the flicker again. Stronger this time, a coal that hadn't quite gone out. You sound like your mother, he said. Good. Kevin had been right about the cars. Before first light, he'd walked to the nearest abandoned vehicle, a Ford F-150 left on the shoulder of Vine Hill Road. Keys still in the ignition. Tank half full. And done something with the battery terminals and the starter that took him 4 minutes and that none of us understood. The engine turned over. He drove it back to the house. We loaded carefully. Water containers in the truck bed covered with a tarp. Food in bags. Medical supplies in Megan's kit. Weapons accessible shotgun in the cab. Rifle with me in the back seat of Rachel's Civic, which still had a quarter tank. 2 vehicles, 6 people, 1 child. Kevin drove the truck with Sophie in the passenger seat, strapped in with a seatbelt and a rabbit and the silent gravity of a child who had learned to be quiet. My father rode with him. Megan, Rachel, and I took the Civic. The first mile was empty. The second mile was empty. On the third mile, we passed a house that was burning. And on the fourth mile, we passed a cluster of them in the road, 6, maybe 7, moving in a loose group with no apparent direction, just drifting like leaves on a current. They turned when they heard the engines. They oriented, but we were past them before they could close the distance. And in the rear-view mirror, I watched them resume their aimless drift, already forgetting us. "They're slow," Rachel said from the driver's seat. "In the open," Megan corrected. I saw the ones at the hospital. In enclosed spaces, they're faster. Corridors focus them. Open ground, they scatter. Close quarters, they swarm. We reached Elizabethtown in 40 minutes. It was ruined. Not completely not burned to the ground or leveled, but the infrastructure of a functioning town had come apart at every seam. Traffic lights dead, windows smashed, cars piled at intersections where multiple people had tried to run the same gap at the same time. And the infected were thicker here, drawn to the density, wandering through parking lots and gas stations and the open doors of houses whose occupants had fled or hadn't fled quickly enough. Kevin's voice crackled on the walkie-talkie Megan had found in our father's garage. "Stay tight. Don't stop. I'll lead through." He drove the truck through Elizabethtown with the confidence of a man who understood machines and physics and the turning radius of a Ford F-150. And Rachel followed. And we wove through the wreckage of a town I'd driven through 100 times on the way to my parents' house, past the Applebee's where Derek and I had eaten on our first road trip together, past the Kroger where my mother bought groceries every Thursday, past the normalcy of a life that had ended so recently its ghost was still warm. On the western edge of town, we had to stop. A jackknifed semi blocked both lanes of the parkway entrance, and the only way around was through a pilot truck stop parking lot that was occupied. I counted 14 of them, moving slowly between the trucks and fuel pumps, some bumping into obstacles and redirecting, others standing motionless, waiting for stimulus. One was still wearing a pilot uniform, the red polo tucked into khakis, a name tag on the chest I could almost read. "We go around," Kevin said on the radio. "Through the lot, behind the building. Pick up the parkway on the other side." "That's 60 feet from the nearest ones," Megan said. 60 feet is fine if we don't stop." We didn't stop. Rachel drove through that parking lot at 20 miles per hour. Steady, controlled, not fast enough to skid on the diesel-slicked asphalt. And the infected turned at the sound and began moving toward us with that terrible patience, that willingness to pursue without urgency because they had nothing else to do, nowhere else to be. And the gap between the building and the perimeter fence was tight, barely wider than the Civic. And Rachel threaded it with her jaw clenched and her knuckles white, and we came out the other side onto the parkway, and the road opened up, and we drove. The Western Kentucky Parkway was clear for 50 miles. It was the best stretch we'd have, and I think all of us knew it. The road cut through rural farmland, open and flat, and the infected were sparse out here, isolated figures in distant fields, standing among the crops like scarecrows that had stepped off their posts. We drove in formation, truck ahead, Civic behind. Sophie slept. My father spoke on the walkie-talkie once to ask Megan how she was holding up. She said fine. He said okay. That was all. But it was something. A filament between them, still intact. I tried not to think about Derek. I failed. 2 days of silence. No call, no text, no signal. He could be at the venue, managing the chaos. He could be on the road, looking for me. He could be at his parents' house in the east end of Louisville, where the density was highest and the outbreak would have hit hardest. He could be anywhere. He could be nowhere. The wedding felt like a story someone had told me about another person. The dress in the back seat was a relic from an excavation, evidence of a civilization that no longer existed. I had been 2 hours from marrying a man I loved, and I had chosen to leave. And I did not regret the choice. My mother was gone. But I had been there. I had held her hand. I had heard her last clear words, but the not knowing was a wound that didn't bleed. It just ached, constantly, a low-grade pain beneath every other urgency. "You'll find him," Rachel said, reading me without looking. "When this stabilizes, you'll find each other." What if it doesn't stabilize? Then you'll find him anyway. Derek Martin is the most stubborn man I've ever met. He's out there, and he's looking. I wanted to believe her. I chose to believe her, which is not the same thing, but is sometimes enough. We turned south on the Pennyrile Parkway toward Hopkinsville, and the landscape changed. More smoke here, thicker haze. The fires from the south had been burning for days, and the air had a taste charcoal and plastic and something sweet that coated the back of the throat. Hopkinsville appeared through the haze like a mirage. Low buildings and church steeples and water towers emerging from the smoke. And between us and the town, the bridge. The Pennyrile crossed a stretch of floodplain on a long, elevated bridge, maybe a quarter-mile from end to end. 2 lanes in each direction, concrete barriers on both sides. No exits, no shoulders. One way in, one way out. It was blocked. Not by the infected, by the living. A barricade of vehicles stretched across both southbound lanes, trucks, SUVs, a school bus, and behind it, people. I could see figures moving, and as we slowed, a man stepped to the front of the barricade holding a rifle. Kevin stopped the truck. Rachel stopped behind him. The walkie-talkie crackled. "Stay in the car," Kevin said. "I'll talk to them." He got out slowly, hands visible, and walked toward the barricade. The man with the rifle watched him approach. They spoke. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the body language, Kevin open and non-threatening. The rifleman tense, but not aggressive. A negotiation conducted in the shorthand of 2 men trying to gauge each other's desperation. Kevin came back. He leaned into my window. "They're locals. Set up the barricade yesterday to keep the infected out of their neighborhood south of the bridge. They'll let us through, but they want supplies, food, water, or ammo." "How much?" They said half of what we're carrying. Half. That would leave us with, I did the math, 35 gallons of water, 3 days of food for 7 people. It wasn't enough. Even if Fort Campbell was real, even if they were receiving refugees, arriving with nothing would make us dependent, vulnerable. "We can't give half. Then we find another way around." Megan had the atlas open. There's no way around. Not without backtracking 20 miles and taking county roads through territory we haven't scouted. That's 2 hours minimum, more fuel, more exposure. Then we negotiate. I got out of the car. I walked to the barricade with my hands at my sides, no weapon, and the man with the rifle watched me come, and his expression changed slightly, not softening, but recalibrating. I was a woman in a t-shirt and jeans with circles under my eyes and no visible threat. "My name is Elena," I said. "We're trying to get to Fort Campbell. We have a child with us and a nurse. We can't give you half our supplies. We'll die before we get there." The man studied me. He was maybe 50, weathered, beard going gray. His rifle was a deer rifle, well maintained. Behind him, I could see others, women, children, elderly. They weren't bandits. They were what we were, survivors building walls out of whatever they could find. "We've got 36 people behind this line," he said, "including 12 kids. We've been here 2 days with no resupply and no contact from anyone who gives a damn. The things on the other side of this bridge are getting thicker every night." I understand. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, your group is moving and ours is stuck. You've got a destination. We've got a bridge. Come with us. The words left my mouth before I'd fully thought them through. And I felt Megan's stare from the car like a physical pressure. The man blinked. "What?" "Fort Campbell is receiving refugees. Military base, operational, broadcasting on the hour. If you're stuck here with diminishing supplies and growing threat, staying doesn't improve. Come with us. We'll share what we have on the road, and when we get there, we all get through." He stared at me for a long time. Behind him, a woman holding a toddler was listening. An old man in a wheelchair was listening. A teenager with a bruised face and a baseball bat was listening. "How far?" the man asked. 40 miles. He looked back at his people. The woman with the toddler nodded. He turned to me. "We've got 6 vehicles that run. 14 adults who can drive or shoot. 22 dependents. Then we go as a convoy, strength in numbers." The man extended his hand. "Dale Whitfield." I shook it. "Elena Reyes." We opened the barricade. We merged. And our group of 7 became a group of 43, and the arithmetic of survival that I had been running since that phone call in the bridal suite expanded beyond any calculation I'd prepared for. And I understood in that moment that this was the real choice. Not my mother or my wedding, not Derek or my blood, but this. The ongoing, compounding, terrifying choice to include. To widen the circle when every instinct screams to contract. The last 40 miles took 4 hours. We hit 3 major clusters. The first, outside Hopkinsville proper, was a crowd of maybe 30 in the road, the largest group I'd seen. And they moved not as individuals, but as a loose collective, oriented the same direction, responding to the same distant stimulus. Dale's people knew the local roads. A teenager named Marcus, the one with the bruised face and the bat, guided us through a subdivision that bypassed the main road, and we lost no one, though the sound of our engines drew a trailing group that followed us for 2 miles before falling behind. The second cluster was at a gas station where we'd stopped to siphon fuel. Kevin was under a car with a hose when Rachel spotted them coming from the tree line 8, moving faster than the ones in the open field, focused, drawn by the noise of conversation and the clang of tools. Dale's people formed a line. 3 shots, controlled and precise. The rest scattered. Kevin finished siphoning without looking up. The third was the worst, and it wasn't a cluster. It was a single infected woman, standing in the middle of the road, holding an infant. The infant was motionless. The woman was swaying. She looked at our approaching convoy and held the baby out toward us, arms extended, like an offering or a plea. And every person in every vehicle saw her and understood something different about what they were looking at. Dale's truck was in the lead. He drove around her without stopping. We all drove around her. And no one spoke on the radios for a long time after. Fort Campbell appeared first as a sound, the deep, rhythmic thud of helicopter rotors, and then as a shape through the haze. Walls. Concrete barriers, 12 feet high, topped with razor wire that caught the late afternoon light. Guard towers. Floodlights already on despite the remaining daylight. their beams cutting through the smoke like searchlights on a coast. The checkpoint on Route 41A was organized. Military vehicles formed a corridor, funneling traffic into a single lane. Soldiers in full gear helmets, vests, rifles stood at intervals. A medic tent was set up to the right, and a line of civilians waited outside it, 50 or 60 deep, sitting on bags and blankets and car hoods, the exhausted patience of people who had arrived and were willing to wait because they had nowhere else to go. A soldier approached our lead vehicle. Dale spoke to him, then Kevin, then me. "How many in your group?" 43, 7 children. "Any medical personnel?" "My sister. She's a pediatric emergency nurse." Something shifted in the soldier's face. "Drive forward to the medical tent. All of you. Screening takes about an hour. Anyone who's clean gets through." I almost didn't believe it. After 3 days of death and smoke and calculations that never balanced, the simple bureaucratic functionality of a checkpoint, a line, a process, a person with a clipboard, felt like a hallucination. A system still operating, people still organizing. The world broken, but not gone. We lined up. We were screened. Temperature checks, visual inspection, a series of questions delivered by a medic who had clearly asked them 10,000 times and would ask them 10,000 more. Sophie held Kevin's hand and answered the medic's questions in a small, clear voice. And when the medic asked her if she was hurt, she shook her head and said, "I'm okay. My bunny's okay too." And the medic looked at the stuffed rabbit and said, "That's a very good bunny," and moved on. Megan was pulled aside, not for screening, but for recruitment. A captain approached her, explained that their medical staff was overwhelmed, that they'd lost 2 nurses to exhaustion in the last 12 hours, that her skills were desperately needed. Megan looked at me. "Go," I said. "That's what you do. I'm not leaving you. You're not leaving me. You're expanding. Go help them, Meg." She went, and I watched my little sister walk toward the medical tent with her bag over her shoulder and her back straight, and I thought of our mother's words, "Take care of Megan. She thinks she doesn't need taking care of." And I thought maybe taking care of Megan meant letting her do the thing that gave her life structure when everything else had fallen apart. My father stood inside the gate and looked around. The base was functioning, generators running, vehicles moving, soldiers and civilians interacting with the controlled chaos of an emergency operation that had found its rhythm. He watched it for a while. Then he turned to me. "Your mother would have hated this," he said. "All these people. She was a homebody. She would have organized them. She would have found the kitchen and started feeding people." A ghost of a smile. The first since her death. She would have. By tomorrow, she'd have been running the place. "That's where I get it." "No," he said. "That's where you both get it. Her and me. She'd plan it, and I'd build it." He looked at me, and the coal behind his eyes wasn't just flickering now. It was catching. "Tell me where to build, Mija. I'm here." I stood inside the gates of Fort Campbell with my father beside me and my sister in the medical tent, and Rachel sitting on the hood of her Civic, sharing a bottle of water with Dale Whitfield, and Sophie asleep in the truck with her rabbit and 43 people who had arrived because I'd said come with us on a bridge in Hopkinsville. And I did not know whether Derek was alive. I did not know whether the world outside these walls would recover. I did not know whether the choice I had made to run from my wedding toward my family was the right one, or just the only one I could live with. But the gates were closing behind us, and the walls were holding, and my sister was saving lives, and my father was ready to build. And somewhere in the smoke and chaos and ruin, I believed that Derek Martin, stubborn, steady, certain. Derek was still alive, still looking, still wearing the lipstick smear I'd pressed to his mouth in a hallway 2 lifetimes ago. I believed it because I had to. Because belief, like survival, is a choice you make before you have proof. I never made it down the aisle at St. Catherine's. The string quartet played to an audience that scattered within the hour, and the flowers wilted on the altar, and the caterer's truck became a barricade on Bardstown Road. The dress that I shed in the back seat of Rachel's Civic is still folded in a storage bin somewhere inside Fort Campbell, wrinkled and smelling of smoke. I keep it. I don't know why. Maybe because it's the last artifact of the woman I was before the phone rang. My mother is buried behind the house on Vine Hill Road, beneath the garden she loved, in soil she'd tended for 30 years. Megan and I will go back for her one day. Not today, not yet. My father builds barracks walls, water filtration rigs, shelving for the supply depot. He builds from dawn to dark. And in the building, I can see him reconstructing something I can't name. Not hope, not yet, but the scaffolding where hope might eventually stand. I still haven't heard from Derek. I check the communication board every morning, the plywood wall near the main gate where people pin notes, names, descriptions, last known locations. Hundreds of names. Thousands. I add mine every week. Elena Reyes, looking for Derek Martin, last seen street, Catherine's Church, Louisville, June 14th. I'm here. I'm waiting. The board is the first place I go every morning and the last place I check every night. One day I'll find his name there, or he'll find mine.